like the weight of consequences. Julian would spend the next 7 years in a cell, staring at concrete walls that told him only one truth. The bars were real. But that realization would come later. First, there was the morning he woke to find his entire life was a meticulously constructed cage with invisible walls, and by the time he discovered the bars were actually steel, it would be far too late. 24 hours earlier, his eyes snapped open. The water stain on the ceiling looked like a clutching hand. Julian stared at it, his chest tight, his forehead slick with sweat despite the cool morning air. The rhythmic ticking of the clock on the dresser counted the seconds of his wakefulness. And beside him, Clara was a still mound beneath thick gray blankets, her blonde hair messy on the white pillowcase. The master bedroom was beginning to lighten with the pale gray of an overcast dawn. 6:30 a.m. He reached for his phone on the mahogany nightstand. His hand was trembling. Julian's feet found the cold teak floor. He stood, gripping the edge of the mattress until his knuckles turned white, the phone still clutched in his other hand. The floorboards creaked slightly beneath his weight. He needed to think. He needed to move. He needed to do something before Clara woke, before the day began, before everything collapsed. But everything had already collapsed. He just didn't know it yet. The underground parking garage was exactly as hostile as he remembered it being during every business trip. Julian leaned against his silver Audi, checking his watch. The heavy steel Rolex felt heavier than usual against his wrist. 8:45 a.m. He had received the address via encrypted message. Level B3, north corner, behind the concrete pillar, marked with a red X. Someone had painted an X there. For him. Specifically for him. The fluorescent lights flickered in a rhythm that made his eyes ache. Drip, drip. Water fell from a corroded pipe somewhere in the distance, each drop echoing off the concrete like a metronome. Somewhere above, traffic moved on the city streets. Down here, there was only emptiness. A man in a navy windbreaker emerged from behind a pillar. He stopped 10 feet away, neither approaching nor retreating. His face was partially obscured by shadow, but Julian could see the brown leather satchel he was carrying. In it, presumably, were copies of the video. Proof, evidence, leverage. Julian lunged. The man's collar came easily into his grip, the fabric bunching beneath his trembling fingers. "Who are you working for?" Julian bellowed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Give me the phone." The stranger reacted instantly, slamming Julian's body against the side of the Audi. Julian felt the cold glass against his cheek, felt the breath drive from his lungs. But the man wasn't done. He drove his knee upward in a professional, practiced motion. The impact came to Julian's solar plexus like a hammer striking an anvil. Julian collapsed to his knees, gasping, unable to draw air. The kick that followed was almost merciful. The man's heavy boot connected with Julian's shoulder and sent him sprawling across the concrete. Julian felt rough stone tear through his jacket and into the skin of his palm. Through the fog of pain, he watched the stranger's silhouette recede into the darkness toward the stairwell exit. Julian lay there, breathing in small, controlled gasps, and reached out. His fingers brushed something on the cold concrete. A business card, gold-rimmed. He pulled it toward him, his vision swimming. L. Vane. Private consultations, nothing else. No phone number, no address. Just a name and a title. Julian stared at it for a long time. The upscale cigar lounge smelled like old money and older smoke. Marcus sat in a deep leather armchair, looking entirely at ease, puffing a thick Cuban cigar with the confidence of a man who had never, in his entire life, doubted himself. He poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses with a precise, practiced motion. The clink of ice against crystal was almost musical. "You look like hell," Marcus said. And he wasn't wrong. Julian's jaw was bruised. His left eye was beginning to swell. There were concrete dust and blood on his shirt cuffs. Julian sat opposite him, nursing the bruise and nursing the bourbon. He placed the business card on the small mahogany table between them. Marcus picked it up, brought it close to his face, studied it with an expression of polite confusion. For a microsecond, barely perceptible, his eyes flickered. "Someone is trying to destroy me," Julian whispered, his voice rough. "Berlin. They know about Berlin." "We'll find him, buddy. Don't worry." Marcus leaned over to light his cigar with a Zippo. The lighter clicked open with a precise, metallic sound. "Your secret is safe with me." As Marcus leaned, his coat opened. Julian's eyes caught on the keychain hanging from his belt. He recognized it instantly. Not because it was unique, it wasn't, but because it was identical to the emblem on the business card. A stylized V inside a circle, rendered in gold. The same logo, the same design, the same symbol that connected everything. Julian took a sip of whiskey, his eyes never leaving the keychain. The whiskey burned, but the burn felt appropriate. It felt honest. Marcus clinked his glass against Julian's untouched one. The crystal made a pure, clear sound. "We'll find him, buddy. Don't worry." In the dark liquid of his glass, Julian saw his own reflection, distorted and small. His best friend was smiling at him with genuine warmth. His best friend was telling him he was safe. His best friend had a keychain that matched a business card left by a man who had beaten him into unconsciousness in a parking garage. The realization came to Julian like a cold wind. The threat was inside his inner circle. The threat had always been inside. Rain streaked the office window. Julian sat at his glass-topped desk, frantically deleting files from his MacBook Pro. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Delete, confirm, permanently delete. The screen kept asking him if he was sure. He wasn't sure about anything anymore. His phone buzzed on the glass. Another message, another countdown. 4 p.m. You have 1 hour. Transfer the 10K to the crypto wallet address below, or Clara gets the link. A Vimeo address was included. Julian stared at it without clicking. He looked at his watch. 4 p.m. exactly. His phone was displaying a countdown timer. 59, 59, 59, 58, 59, 57. He clicked the link. The video was grainier than expected. Shot from a high angle. A security camera, perhaps, or a phone mounted somewhere innocuous. He recognized the hallway immediately. The Berlin Hotel. He recognized himself entering a room with a woman in a red dress. The footage was jerky, pixelated, but clear enough. It was undeniably him. It was undeniably infidelity. Julian slammed the laptop shut. The screen went black. The landline phone rang. The caller ID displayed in blue, Marcus, Mobile. Julian didn't answer. He let it ring. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. His office was silent except for the sound of the phone and the rain and his own breathing. He could feel his heart beating in his chest like something trying to escape. The phone kept ringing. On the 4th ring, Julian swept a stack of folders off his desk. Papers scattered across the carpet like snow. Bank statements, legal documents, letters from firms he'd never contacted. His sweeping arm caught a heavy brass paperweight shaped like an eagle. He grabbed it and squeezed it until his palm ached. The phone stopped ringing. The concrete stairs of the service stairwell echoed with the sound of Julian's dress shoes clattering downward. He was carrying a manila envelope. He was moving fast, too fast. The metal handrail flashed past beneath his trailing hand. The basement locker room was supposed to be empty at 4:30 p.m. It wasn't. A large man in a gray tracksuit stepped out from the landing above. He was holding a retractable steel baton. He swung it with casual professionalism, and it connected with the metal railing with a sound like a church bell. Clang. The baton gleamed under the yellow fluorescent light. Julian reacted. He swung the manila envelope at the man's face. The paper was flimsy, no match for the steel, but he swung anyway. The envelope split. Stacks of fake prop money, bills printed with "For motion picture use only" in small letters, exploded into the air like green confetti. 100 bills, maybe more, spiraled down the stairwell. The henchman swung the baton downward. Julian dodged left, but not far enough. The baton clipped his shoulder, a glancing blow that still carried enough force to send him stumbling backward. He lost his footing on the next step. The kick came fast. The henchman's boot connected with Julian's chest, driving all the air from his lungs. Julian fell backward down half a flight of stairs, his body tumbling, his skull cracking against the metal frame of a service door. The impact was sharp and immediate. Red blood smeared the gray paint of the door frame. Julian tasted copper. The henchman looked down at the scattered money. His expression changed, confusion followed by contempt. He spat on the stairs and turned toward the roof access. Pushing through the heavy metal door, it slammed shut behind him with the finality of a vault. Julian lay on the stairs, semi-conscious, his vision swimming. Above him, a single piece of fake paper drifted down and settled on his chest like a butterfly. He stared at the fine print. For motion picture use only. Everything was fake. The money was fake. The threat was fake. The reassurances were fake. Everything except the pain. The public restroom had harsh fluorescent lighting and porcelain sinks that had been scrubbed clean 1,000 times. Julian splashed cold water on his face, watching it run pink with blood. A brown paper towel came away stained as he pressed it against his temple. The water swirled down the drain in red spirals. He reached for his phone. A missed call from an unknown number. A voicemail link had been sent via SMS. Julian clicked it. The audio was grainy but clear enough. Two people talking. A woman's voice first. "He's at the office now. Did you send the link? I want him to sweat before I leave him." Julian froze. He knew that voice the way a man knows his own heartbeat. Without thinking about it, automatically, completely. It was Clara. Marcus's voice responded, "He's falling apart, Clara. Just like we planned." Julian's phone hit the tile floor. The screen shattered but didn't die. The audio kept playing from the broken speaker. Julian stared at his reflection in the cracked mirror. His own face looked back at him like something from a horror film. Pale, distorted, barely human. The voicemail continued. Clara's voice. "Good. Transfer the second payment to my account. I want it done before the police come." Julian looked at the smashed phone. He looked at his reflection. He looked at the truth. The unseen emotional imprisonment was a stage play. Every moment of guilt, every whispered reassurance, every offered hand, all of it was theater. His wife and his best friend had written the script. They had cast him as the lead. They had even choreographed the fight scenes. He traced the crack in the mirror with his eye. The crack ran from one side of his forehead to the other, splitting him in two. Julian drove the coastal highway at 90 miles per hour. The speedometer needle climbed past that mark and kept climbing. His knuckles were white on the leather steering wheel. The interior light cast a blue hue across his face. Behind him, the city lights were fading. Ahead, there was only darkness and rain. A framed photograph sat on the passenger seat. He and Clara at the beach, both of them smiling in the sun, both of them looking like people without secrets. Julian stared at it for a moment too long. His hand came up and crashed through the glass frame. The photograph tore. Glass shards scattered across the leather seat like ice. His phone rang. Marcus calling again. Julian picked it up and held it out the open window. The wind tore it from his grip. It disappeared into the rainy darkness. And when he checked the rearview mirror, its light was already gone. The car hydroplaned slightly. The tires screeched on wet asphalt. Julian overcorrected. The guardrail loomed, and for a moment he thought he might simply drive through it, tumble over the edge, and be done. Instead, the car brushed the metal rail with a shower of sparks. The Audi swerved back into the correct lane. Julian slowed down as the familiar neon sign came into view. Safe Haven Estates. The sign flickered with pink and green light. Safe Haven. How long had it been safe? Had it ever been safe? Or had he simply never asked the right questions? He breathed heavily at the gate, staring at the security camera mounted above it. No doubt there was footage. No doubt someone was watching. He drove through. Marcus was standing by the fireplace when Julian burst through the front door. The man was holding a glass of scotch, and he turned with an expression of perfect composure, as if he had been expecting this moment his entire life. Water dripped from Julian's coat onto the white rug. The water was dark, almost black, almost like something other than water. Julian tackled him. Both men crashed through the glass coffee table in a tangle of limbs and fury. The table exploded into thousands of pieces. Glass scattered across the white rug like diamonds, like ice. Like the fractured remains of a marriage, Marcus punched upward, his fist connecting with Julian's ribs. The pain was immediate and severe, but not severe enough to stop him. Julian felt it and kept moving. Marcus rolled him over, reversing the position, and grabbed a heavy crystal ashtray from the floor. The ashtray swung downward toward Julian's head. Julian caught his wrist, twisting until he felt something give. The ashtray fell to the floor. Marcus grunted with pain, but he wasn't done. He was never done. This was what he'd been trained for. This was what he'd been planning. Julian drove his forehead downward. Their skulls collided with a crack like a gunshot. The impact echoed through the room and through his own vision, blooming into stars. He could taste blood, his own or Marcus's, or both. Marcus slumped back against the sofa. His nose was bleeding profusely. Blood ran down his chin and stained his white shirt. Julian stood over him, chest heaving, holding a jagged shard of glass from the coffee table. The shard was the size of his palm, sharp enough to do serious damage. Sharp enough to draw more than just blood. Julian held it there, trembling with effort and rage. Every punch, Julian. Marcus's voice came out nasal, damaged. He was laughing anyway. Every scream. It's all going to the cloud. Clara's watching right now. Julian looked at the ceiling corners. In each corner, a small black camera with a blinking red light. Recording, always recording. He'd been on camera his entire life, he realized. He'd just never paid attention to it. The shard of glass in his hand became very heavy all at once. Julian opened his fingers and let it fall to the floor. It clicked against the hardwood. Marcus pulled a tablet from under the sofa. He swiped the screen once, twice, and then turned it so Julian could see. Clara was sitting in a white room, talking to a lawyer. She was signing documents with a flourish of her pen. The papers in front of her were clearly visible. Divorce papers. The header was unmistakable. "How long?" Julian asked. 6 months, Marcus said. He was still bleeding, still smiling. "We drafted them in April. We've just been waiting for you to slip up." Julian looked at the tablet's date stamp. April 12th, 6 months earlier. Before Berlin. Before the hotel room. Before any of it. They'd known what they were going to do before they'd even done it. They'd simply built a trap and waited for him to step into it. Blue and red lights began to flash against the living room walls. Police cruisers in the driveway. An ambulance somewhere close by. The sirens were getting louder. Julian sank to the floor, surrounded by broken glass and fake money. The blue and red lights washed over him in alternating waves. He looked at Marcus. Marcus was still smiling. 7 years later, Julian sat on a narrow cot with a thin blue mattress. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. The cell was gray cinder block, a small window of reinforced glass, a steel toilet without a seat, a sink that ran brown water. There were bars on the door. There was a window that looked out onto a prison yard surrounded by more bars. The hum of electricity was constant. In the distance, metal doors clanged open and shut. The rhythm of the prison was its own kind of music, brutal and regular and utterly predictable. Julian stared at his hands. They were clean. They had been clean for a long time. He traced a scar on his palm with his thumb. The scar was white and thin, a relic from his previous life. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, the faces of the woman in Berlin and Clara didn't evoke panic. They didn't evoke anything. The weight of the bars felt real beneath his hands. That was something. Reality. Fact. Concrete truth. He'd spent so much of his life in fabrication that actual steel felt like a gift. He leaned his head against the cold metal of the bars and felt the weight of his body against them. The bars didn't move. They didn't shift. They didn't lie to him. A guard walked by, tapping the bars with a wooden baton. The sound was sharp. Wood on metal, clack, clack, clack. Julian didn't flinch. He simply watched the guard's silhouette move past his window, past his cell, past his life. At night, Julian lay down on the thin pillow and looked at the ceiling. There was no water stain here. No image of a clutching hand. Just flat, cold concrete. He watched it and felt the buzzer sound in the distance, marking some arbitrary transition from one moment to the next. Sleep came easily. Clara poured champagne into 2 flutes. The golden liquid bubbled and frothed. Behind her, Marcus's hands were on her waist. The kitchen was modern and minimalist, all clean lines and empty surfaces. The opposite of their previous life, the opposite of everything they'd constructed. She handed him a glass. Marcus raised it high. "To the perfect confession," he said. Clara clinked her glass against his. The crystal made a pure, clear sound. She glanced at the laptop on the counter. The screen was showing footage of Julian's arrest. Police lights, Julian's face, Julian's hands being placed behind his back. It had worked perfectly. Everything had gone exactly according to plan. Her phone on the counter vibrated. Clara reached for it while Marcus was focused on his champagne. An encrypted message from an unknown number. She opened it while Marcus wasn't looking. "London was lovely, Clara. Marcus doesn't know about the photographer there yet." She held the phone screen away from him, her face going still. She looked at Marcus. He was laughing about something, some private joke. His hand was on her waist, possessive and warm. She turned the phone away and took a long sip of champagne. The windows were dark. In the reflection of the glass, she could see herself standing in this modern kitchen with this man who knew everything about her betrayals. This man who had orchestrated her husband's destruction. This man who was now, apparently, orchestrating her own. She stared at her reflection. In the prison yard, Julian lifted a heavy iron weight. His muscles strained against it. but his face was peaceful. He looked up at the sky through the chain-link fence. The light was bright and clear and utterly indifferent to his presence. In her new apartment, Clara sat at her vanity and applied lipstick. Her hand shook, leaving a red smear across her cheek that looked like a scar. The clock on the wall ticked with the same rhythm she remembered from Julian's bedroom. The same rhythm from 7 years ago. Julian dropped the weight. It hit the dirt with a final, heavy thud. Dust rose around his boots. He walked away into the shadow of the cell block without looking back. Clara heard a notification sound. Her phone chirped from the dresser. She picked it up slowly. An image. A photograph of herself sitting at this vanity, taken from outside the window. The picture showed exactly what was happening right now. It showed her holding the phone. It showed the lipstick smear on her cheek. She looked at the window. It was dark. The reflection was just her own face staring back. Another notification, another image, another photograph of something that had happened only moments before. The cycle of self-punishment was beginning. End of story.